Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Put a Fork in It podcast, the podcast delivering fresh perspectives at the intersection of food, health, business, and creativity. I'm your host, Caylena Cahill, the founder and creative director for CC Photo and Media, a Hudson Valley, New York-based photo-centric marketing company. Today's guest is Diane Hatz, founder and executive director of Change Food, a nonprofit organization and grassroots movement creating a healthy, equitable food system. Change Food raises public awareness and connects various parts of the food movement through capital, consulting, and community. They host events, fundraisers, and have an online video library that helps connect and inform people interested in the food movement. During our interview, Diane and I discuss a lot of great topics. I was interested in hearing her take on subjects related to the food movement, food systems, and entrepreneurship in food. I'm excited to share this interview with you, and I hope you are inspired and find some useful and tactical information that you can put into practice. Thanks, Diane, for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to get in deep and talk about your organization, Change Food, and also kind of how you got there. And I know that I looked through your LinkedIn profile and everything, so I saw some of your background. So I noticed first that you used to work in the music industry a bit, and then you shifted into food. Can you talk a little bit about how you made that transition?
Well, I get asked that all the time, and it's not the most exciting story. I was in the music industry. I think, got to my early 30s, and I realized I just had to get out, and I hadn't interviewed for a job for so long, so I sent out a practice resume. It was a little ad in the New York Times. I faxed my resume, which you probably don't even know what a fax is.
I know what a fax is. Come on.
They offered me the job, and I took it. It turned out that it was a nonprofit that had recently started, and I got to help build it. And it was focused on animal welfare, factory farming, and then I helped bring together a group of consultants that worked around the country to shut down factory farms. And from that, I realized that I have a marketing background, that we needed to be positive. So that shifted to sustainable work. So I fell into food and then was able to carve out a niche for myself.
Okay, how did you carve out a niche?
I was fortunate that I was at a nonprofit that I got in when it was very small. So I started doing more on the ground organizing, realized we're not going to get to general consumers unless we do something a little more positive. So I founded this program, which has recently gone defunct, but I founded this program called Sustainable Table, it was a website. This is back in 2003. It was a website where anybody could go to learn all the different issues about factory farming and industrial agriculture and all the problems with our food system. And it was done in an easy to understand way. And it all started because somebody had contacted me and wanted to know the definition of genetic engineering. And I searched all the websites at the time, and all websites assumed that the person knew what genetic engineering was. And that was like crazy to me. So I was able to do that. From that, I was able to found this thing called the Eat Well Guide. This is before apps and before any social media. You just put in your zip code, it would bring up farm stores and restaurants that sold local sustainable food. So that's how I was very fortunate to be in an environment where if I had an idea, a lot of times I was told, just go, do it.
Okay. But you must be really interested in this area now. I mean, considering all the things that you founded throughout time, that I noticed on your on your LinkedIn profile, you said founded, founder, director, there was a lot of that. So.
Yes. So I'm one of those people, maybe I was just on the early edge of like millennials and younger people now, because I find that a lot of younger people just want to do social good. They want to do something good. It's in their DNA. And I'm the same type of person. So I didn't know how I could sort of best affect positive change in the world. And after getting into food, for me, it became apparent that food connects with almost every single issue. I mean, a lot of people don't think about education. So huge problems with education, but you cannot educate a child unless they're fed and fed well because they cannot learn. So food impacts so many different areas that I'm very, very passionate about it.
And that passion, I'm assuming, grew as you worked more within the area of food.
Yes. And what's happened, so I started trying to shut down factory farms that moved into educating consumers about issues with sustainable agriculture. So I was one of the people pushing local, organic, sustainable. It's pretty common. Almost every grocery store in the country now has a local section or an organic section, et cetera. Now I've sort of evolved. My interest now is in the last few years, investors like Silicon Valley investors that invested in tech are investing in food businesses. In 2015, $4.6 billion was invested in food startups and food technology. And I'm becoming more and more pissed off because community leaders I know that are working to restore their community, to build local economies using food are not getting the investment and the funding that like a 3D printed ravioli machine is. And there's becoming a growing disparity in the food system. So my where I've sort of evolved into now is I'm trying to figure out how to build bridges between like the nonprofit advocacy movement and the for-profit food startup, food tech movement, because I think we need each other. And if we really are going to create an equitable food system for everyone, we have to work together.
Okay, great. So that's a great transition. I did see a video on the Change Food website where you were talking about that the food tech versus the good food movement and everything, and how you wanted to build bridges between them, and even the thing about the ravioli machine.
It's my pet peeve.
Yeah.
Pet peeve right now.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. But you made a great point in the video about that. I mean, technology can be a great help in solving some of the major problems that we're having if we just apply it well, you know. But let's take a step back for a moment for the listeners that maybe don't really know what the heck we're talking about at all with in terms of food tech versus good food movements and all these. Can you just kind of give a brief overview of what these different movements are?
So I'm not an expert in social movements, but when movements start, they start by volunteers, by activists, by what will then become nonprofits. So it's people who care about an issue and they're waving a flag saying, whoa, 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 there's a problem with this. So in the 50s and 60s, big companies started launching products like margarine, Pam cooking spray, a Cool Whip. Go read the ingredients on the labels of those products that are still around. So what happened is in the 70s, and Alice Waters is credited as being one of the first people. She opened her restaurant, Chez Panisse, in Northern California using all local food. People around the country started, I don't want to say it was a backlash, but it was a reaction to all this processed, gross, fake, chemical-laden food. People started going back to the land, and the hippie counterculture started to produce wholesome food. So starting in the 70s, people started this, hey, there's something wrong with all the chemicals like, FH6, yellow dye, whatever. I can't even pronounce some of the chemicals in some of the foods that are in the center of the grocery store. And couple that with the obesity epidemic that became really prevalent in the 2000s, people realized there was a problem. So the good food movement have been the educators that have been raising awareness across the country about problems with food and our food system. The food tech movement are the Silicon Valley venture capitalist and VC people who are now looking at ways to make money off of food. So Blue Apron, it's a home meal delivery service. So you can order ingredients. It's organic. It's all locally sourced, organic. It's good food. But an investor will invest in them because they see money in the technology and the delivery platform. I believe the investors need to understand what's going on with food. And I got to be honest, the ones I've talk to glaze over. They're still focused on money. The thing with them that I'm trying to impress is that there's a shift going on and that companies are going more and more towards social good. So all companies now have to be green. They have to say they're sustainable. They have to have a CSR report. Where they're headed toward is they're going to have a social impact, like social good impact. So I try to explain to investors that it's a marketing advantage for them to actually do social good. So don't just look at making money off a product. Look at a longer term investment where you can help a community. I know that's very long and confusing, so I'm going to pause and let you clarify or ask a question because this is a very long answer. It's very involved. The bottom line is every part of the food movement is related to each other. So the nonprofit world, who are the educators and raising awareness, most of them still don't understand the impact the for-profit investors are having on the food movement. I know founders of smaller companies who they want to do everything the right way. They don't have the education that the nonprofits have and can give them. So that as they grow into the next Amazon, or it won't be Walmart, but until as they grow into the next big store, a Whole Foods or whatever, they'll understand the issues, so they'll make the right decisions, so we won't end up breaking the food system again.
So how do you go about doing something like that?
Right now, well, I'm speaking with you. I'm trying to get word out. I'm going to a conference in Italy next week called Seeds and Chips, which is a food tech conference, and I'm bringing these issues up there. So I just got back from the TED conference where I hosted a dinner, and a bunch of VC people came. So I'm, number one, trying to understand how investors think who are investing in food. And then secondly, I'm just trying to explain to them that it is in their financial interest to reach out to nonprofits to understand the food system. It's not like a piece of technology. This is much different. And something I'm very excited about right now is through this, what I've noticed is a lot of communities who are underserved are not getting the investment or the attention they need. So there is a growing groundswell of people who are starting to focus on helping the Steve Ritz from Green Bronx Machine, Tony Hillary from Harlem Grown, Ron Finley out in LA. I mean, these are the people who are doing amazing work who need more financial support. They get a lot of maybe press, but they're not getting the kind of investment and help that they need.
So what can we do to get them more help?
General public, I would say follow them. I mean, if their social media numbers are up, then that will help when an investor or funder looks to give them money. Volunteer. If somebody really wants to, they can do research and send them info on grants. One of the problems with having a small nonprofit, because Change Food is small too, is you're not only running the organization, you're trying to raise money. And there's only so many hours in the day. So I don't understand, and I'm still trying to figure out why a glorified online CSA, which went out of business recently, that lost $26 million, why they got $26 million investment when so many nonprofits that I know who are doing amazing work can't raise $10,000. Doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah, no.
And I know for-profit, nonprofit, there's a difference. So, for-profit is a certain type of investor, nonprofit or philanthropists and foundations. But these investors that have made a lot of money, most of them have a private foundation, and they do some type of philanthropic work. So I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out how to connect to get their nonprofit arm to help with the nonprofit food side, because that's how we can start to build bridges with each other. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'm doing with Change Food, so there's a company called Rise. They're engineers. They have found a way to take the spent grain used to make beer, and they turn it into flour. It's higher protein, lower carb, lower gluten, and I just had a cookie made from it, and it's amazing. Like, it tastes amazing. So it deals with food waste. It deals with a lot of issues. We're there. They and I, Change Food and Rise, are hosting a dinner in July. Proceeds will benefit Change Food, and then in return, we're helping, raise awareness about what they're doing. I think the whole idea of for-profit, nonprofit, I know there are legalities, on certain levels, but otherwise there is no difference. Like, it doesn't matter. We're all trying to build a food system where everyone has healthy, delicious food.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree about that. I mean, I know there are legal distinctions or tax distinctions, but I mean, fundamentally, you're both an organization trying to do something.
Right.
Right. And I mean, I've worked in nonprofits, and the mentality can be so different where, like they don't want to spend money on marketing because, that's another like admin cost and stuff. But the problem is that you need to do marketing so people know about you.
That's my biggest frustration because and I hate to say it, I'm not a genius, but I've made a career on being a marketing expert in the nonprofit world because people that I know or have known tend to think marketing is fundraising and raising money. And I explain to them, why do you spend all this money developing a white paper or a report and then you do nothing with it? You don't know how to market it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about bringing it out to the people so that they can actually see what you're doing.
Yes, and it's about getting other people aware of what you're doing and then getting people to connect. The other thing that I think is extremely important that isn't mainstream yet is that the 21st century is based more on collaboration, not on competition. So two people who might look like competitors, the thinking is shifting. They're actually collaborators. So especially with smaller companies, if they join forces, they're twice as strong. They're not competing against each other. So I believe that even within the nonprofit world, I really go out of my way to partner with other groups. And I'm like, look, I know we all care about funding, but if we all come together and work toward a single means, we can together collectively get more funding. That's a new thought. Because if you've worked in a nonprofit, I think you know that there can be a lot of fear around funding.
Definitely.
But there are people like me. I'm not the only one that feels this way because there's a growing group of us that are like, money isn't everything. Like, I believe, I don't want to get woo-woo, but I believe that money is secondary and that if you have a lot of passion, it's passion and perseverance, and you work really hard, the money will come. You just keep going and going and going. Just raising money for money's sake, it's just old-fashioned, in my opinion. And I think that even philanthropists are starting to catch on. I mean, 10 years ago, I never heard anyone in the nonprofit world talk about metrics. And in marketing, metrics is just a term. It's like, how are you going to prove that you're successful? And now I hear, funders saying they want metrics. So there's a slight shift going. But I do think nonprofits should be more business minded, still social good, but operate more like a business.
Right. Or even, what is it called? A B Corp or an S Corp? One of those.
B Corp is a business.
Oh, maybe it was the S Corp. S Corp was the one I was thinking of. Social corporation or something. It's a different kind of distinction in the classifications, but it's like
it's a distinction, but you still do things like budgeting.
Right.
It's just accountability. It's like your accountability isn't profit; it's impact.
Right.
But anyway, here nor there. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, so you seem to be a go-getter, somebody that likes to create things and start things. You don't seem to have a problem with starting things from scratch. So I want to talk a little bit about that. What goes through your mind when a new project comes about that you're like, this sounds like a good idea, I should do this. How do you get yourself to go do it and start it?
I'm sorry, how do you
get yourself to actually go do it? I mean,
you know what? I got to be honest. I'm one of those people. I don't have to do anything to get myself to go do it. I just start doing it. If I see something, it's like I get so excited that I just start doing it.
So how do you figure out what the first step of doing it is? Because I know it can get overwhelming if you have like a big dream or a big vision to, maybe when you started Change Food or you were working on with your partner for Glenwood and everything, maybe it seemed like it was a big idea, but how do you know what the first step is?
That's a good question. I'm a big list person. I just start writing down ideas and then they'll just gel together. So when I was at Glenwood, there was this big media center that I wanted to put together, and I developed this whole blueprint of this nonprofit media center with all these different arms, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't work. But from that came the idea for the Change Food Video Library, which I still have, which I have phase 1 done of. So I am not someone to have meetings and to sit around and think through and just put something together. If you don't take the first step, you're never going to get anywhere. So I just believe in taking the first step. So with me right now, I mean, you're actually catching Change Food in a transition because there are so many events right now. There are so many people working in food that I have taken a step, not back, a step aside, and I'm looking at what Change Food can do to today impact the food movement and the food system. So that's where this whole thing about technology, the food tech and the nonprofit food, I sense that is so important. So I'm starting by speaking. What's going to come out of it in the end, I don't know. I just know inherently this is very important. And it's hard to explain. It's just, I guess I believe that people need to just work on intuition and not be afraid and just jump in.
Yeah, it's like you can spend all day planning and thinking and figuring out the best way to go about things, but at the end of the day, what have you actually done?
Right. And this is this might sound like a silly example, but I'm 16 years old. I'm living in Delaware. This is before computers and any internet and any cell phones. And I love the band The Who. And I want to meet The Who. And I don't know how I'm going to meet The Who, and I don't want to be a groupie. So I love to write, and I'm like, oh my God, I'll do a fanzine. So I did a fanzine for like 12 years. I got to meet and know the band. I'm in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, all these things happened because I didn't sit around just going, oh, I really want to meet the band. Like, no, okay, what are my action steps?
Right. So I guess my question is really, how do you figure out the action steps?
I think I would throw out that a lot of people get stuck in trying to think about the action steps. I just take action. So if someone wants to get into the food movement, contact people. There's so many events. Just go to events, just be open, start talking to people. I talk to people all the time. The one thing people have to realize is if you're trying to get into the food movement, people like me might have 100 people a month want to meet. So that is getting more difficult. But, I'm really big on, I still have, 10 or 20 years left where I'll be working. But, I look at the 20-somethings that have come into the food movement with all their passion, and I'm starting to mentor, and I'm starting to look at how I can help boost other people's careers. So, but it's the people who step up that I'm helping. So I can take it just from a volunteer level. I have maybe 12 volunteers right now. And what they do is they drop out. And there are ones who really shine, who are really passionate. And there are ones I'm going to help get a job. And I'm going to help them get in. But they took action. They found me. They did the work. They want something. And they're not basing it on, from the get-go, I have to have a $100,000 job. They're like, I love this issue. I'm passionate about doing this. And from that, things come.
Yeah, well, it's like with this podcast, I had been thinking about doing it for 9 months to a year. And then one day I was like, okay, I need to write a blog post for my marketing newsletter. Actually, why don't I just interview the executive director of my chamber? and I'll just do that as my first podcast. And so I was like, okay, I have my microphones, I have my computer. Hey, Kathy, let's do an interview. I'm going to call it my podcast, and we're going to start. And then I did it. And then
that's it. It's that simple. What has shocked me, it does shock me, is how many people just don't have that. And I don't know if you have to have it in your DNA, because look, I'm a founder, you know. I love to create things. If I have a challenge, it's maintaining it. So like with Change Food, I think what I'm going to start doing now is look to build it a bit, but I would love to bring in someone to be the executive director, and I can be the creative officer, and I can do all the fun stuff, and then I can just keep founding things. But like payroll and human resources and all that kind of stuff is just not my thing. But I know people who love to project manage, who love to do human resources. So it's a matter really of figuring out your personality type. And like, if you're not a founder, don't be upset about it. Like, don't force yourself into, you know, a hole you don't fit in. We all can do good and be excited about our jobs by doing different things. Like, I know people who are accountants who love it. I want to jump out the window when I think of accounting.
Me too. But luckily I've got an accountant, and I found QuickBooks Self-Employed, which has changed my life.
Good.
Well, you know, when your bookkeeping app connects to all your accounts, and then it notifies you on your phone when you have to decide whether it's a business or not a business expense, it's really easy. It's really
Good.
Yeah. But in any case, that's not really relevant to this conversation. But all right, cool. So we mentioned Glenwood a little bit and Change Food. Can you just give a brief overview of what these organizations are? I've been wanting to have someone from Glenwood on the podcast, but I seem to not be able to get someone currently.
So I was at Glenwood, I think I left in 2013. I co-founded the Glenwood Institute, which is not the Glenwood Center. The president at the time and I co-founded it together. What happened was, while I was there, I started doing TEDx Manhattan, which was a TEDx event all on food and farming. When the former president was leaving, I decided to sort of break off. TEDx Manhattan had sort of taken over my life. So I was never really Glenwood. I was Glenwood Institute. I know you're confused. Everyone was confused. So I'm not really affiliated. I'm not affiliated at all with Glenwood.
Okay, so it's something different?
Yes.
Okay.
The Glenwood Institute was like a division of Glenwood, but Glenwood itself is the farm upstate.
Okay.
It's too confusing to get into. Still confuses me. But that's 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago. But before that, I had Sustainable Table, which was the consumer education program, the Ewell Guide. And then really the biggest thing from back then was this flash animation I'm the executive producer of, called The Matrix. It was before social media. It became really, it's considered the most successful online advocacy film ever. And I would love to tell you our marketing tactics, but we emailed a lot of people and then it just went viral. You know how, I'm sure you understand, there's a tipping point. When something goes viral, if it just gets past a certain point, it just goes crazy.
Right. It must be on YouTube at this point, right?
Oh, yeah. YouTube was not invented.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. But once YouTube came out right after, within 6 months, I think, of it being released. But yes, it's online. It was always online, but it was just you had to go to a website.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy to think 15 years ago things were so different.
Yeah, no, I know, definitely. And I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm still different from like the kids now who it's like crazy to me to see how the kids now are different from, and I'm like not that old. Like,
so how do I feel when I talk to them? You don't know how old I am. I'm probably twice your age.
Well, it's not that important. We're both professionals, you know.
Oh, exactly.
But yeah, so all right, cool. So talk to me about what Change Food is and what you're doing with that and where you see it going.
So Change Food we're a grassroots movement creating a healthy, equitable food system. So that's the overarching mission. And the way we're trying to achieve that goal, there's three pillars, and this is sort of the redefined new change food. So there's three pillars: capital, consulting, and community. So with capital, I'm currently trying to either work with a foundation or get a fund to help fund these programs that I know that aren't getting the attention they need, to try to help them bump to the next level, and then to interest investors and philanthropists to invest in them. Then consulting is, I started mentoring a food accelerator program. So I mentor food startups, which is how I started to understand the whole thing about food tech and nonprofit food. So, I'm positioning Change Food as like a marketing service where people who want to learn more about food issues, or food tech companies that want to like bring people into an accelerator, that type of thing. I have a perspective that a finance person won't have, because I've worked on the ground for 20 years. And then the third thing is community. A big part of Change Food is building community. So I've put on events for 6 years now. We're going to continue with the events. I'm looking at, as I mentioned earlier, doing more collaborative events, because there's so many events now. The thing that Change Food does that other events don't do is we professionally film everybody who speaks. Because I have done a TEDx, I have spoken at a TED Active, which is a TED event. I have sort of the key on how to be a speaker. So I train speakers. Like, it's a really big thing. So we edit the videos, put them online. They go in the Change Food video library. The point of that is to add additional resources and then encourage people around the world to put on their own events to educate people in their community about issues around food and farming. I can provide resources to people working in local communities, but I can't go into anybody else's neighborhood and tell them what to do. And the only way the food system, I believe, will change is ground up. So on top of that, with the community building, we started doing dinners and looking at ways to connect people, even if it's people who want to get into the food movement but don't know how. Like, how can we bring people together? Because that, to me, is all the raw talent that the food system needs and that the whole movement needs. So how do we do it? Because I think I don't know how a lot of people do what they do, because it is an industry where people are not paid very well. And so how can that change? I think another big thing for me is, and I'm guilty too, I live a unsustainable life, and I promote sustainability. I work way too much. I love it though. Like, I don't consider what I do work, but I do know that I work too much. And I've been reading all this stuff about you can't be really creative if you're constantly working. You have to go walk in the woods. You have to, like, that activates other parts of your brain. So I'm trying to figure out how to build a sustainable life for me, and also how to help newer, and it's not an age thing. When I say younger, I mean younger to the movement. People who are newer to the movement, how to help them develop a career but also keep a sustainable life.
Yeah, I mean, we're all complex and we're all trying to figure it out,
Right.
So,
Right.
All right. So just a couple of topical things just to move through, and then my final questions that I ask everybody at the end. So I noticed one of your videos where you were talking about food waste and climate change. That was an interesting topic. So can you just give a little nutshell about what the major problem is, and then a couple of simple ways to combat that?
So the biggest problem with food waste is that 40% of all our food is wasted. It's different areas. There's waste in the field. There's waste in the refrigerator. There's a massive movement globally to start tackling food waste. People, are always saying, oh, we have to feed the world. We don't have enough food. Yes, we do have enough food. We just aren't distributing it properly. We aren't using ugly produce. There's a big campaigns about ugly produce. So everybody expects like a tomato to be perfect in a perfect shape. But those tomatoes tend to be sprayed with chemicals to be forced to turn red, and they taste like cardboard because they're not grown in a field like they should be. If your tomato is wrinkly and like looks weird, that's good. It's just as edible. So there's a big move to educate people around that. With regards to food waste and climate change, the waste, and this was an eye opener for me because I always thought when I threw scraps away, like banana peels and different scraps, that it would just decompose and turn into soil in the trash dump. But what I found out is it actually emits methane, and it emits gases that contribute to climate change. So the less food we put into landfill, the less effect it's going to have on climate.
Okay.
So, and I think New York City, there are some cities that they're starting to mandate food waste. I don't know if they're still doing it here, but even New York City is looking into it. One of the things that I am really excited about is working with companies. A lot of startups are focused on food waste, is working with them because I do think we need solutions. So, for example, you can now, I don't know if they're on the market, but there are refrigerators who will actually tell you when food's going bad because the food in the back goes bad. People tend to overbuy, overcook. So one really, really simple thing anyone can do is write a shopping list down before you go shopping. Don't buy the 2-for-1 if it's perishable and you know you're not going to eat it. A lot of it is just common sense once you realize what's happening. But even, I'm even guilty. But composting is a big thing. So anybody who's interested should look to see if a local farmer's market or if there are local areas where people are composting. So I live where I can walk everywhere, but I had to get the subway one morning recently, and I went down First Avenue to get on the F. And there's a woman with trash can, like at the entrance right before the subway, where anybody could bring their composting scraps and drop them off. Things like that are popping up all over. And the compost is turned back to soil, which goes back into land. So that also is another solution. The number one thing with food waste is to feed other people. So there's also efforts underway when food is getting ready to expire. A lot of people won't buy it, so selling it at a lower cost. So then people are going to buy it. So for a general consumer, I would say shopping list, buy what you eat, don't cook too much. We cook way too much. If you do, freeze it, have leftovers. If you have a dinner party, have containers so people can take leftovers home if you know you're not going to eat it or freeze it. And they're really, really simple things, but they have a big impact.
Totally. Okay, great. So we're going to move on to the ending questions because I know you do have to go pretty soon. So the first question is, how do you define health and healthy, and why is that important?
Oh, Lord. How do I define health and healthy? There's physical health, there's spiritual health, there's emotional health, there's physical health, there's mental health. So health to me is when an organism is fully functioning to the best of its ability. I think in this country and elsewhere, we don't focus enough on emotional or mental health. I think stress is the biggest killer. I know a lot of people agree with that. So health and being healthy means learning how to manage your life, learning how to live a sustainable life, learning what the real priorities in life are, like being the prettiest, the richest, the thinnest. All those is really not that important in the end. So I would say health is knowing who you are and being comfortable and grateful for what you have.
Good answer.
Thank you.
All right.
That was a tough question.
say, I mean, we're part of the food movement, so I think health has to be a part of the conversation. So,
And just if you want to take it to food and health, food is the fuel to create health in people. So healthy food is absolutely essential, but it's not the end goal. So if you're stressed out and you hate your life, but you're eating all organic, and you're getting your personal chef to make you these great raw vegan meals, but if you're in a miserable relationship, you're not healthy.
true. Yeah, because it's all interconnected, and
Correct.
I mean, you can be eating the greatest foods, so maybe your body feels great, but then your emotional weight is just kind of making you. I mean, it's kind of a cycle that feeds into
Well, the
each
emotional
other.
weight is going to bring on stress, so you're not going to digest the nutrients as well. You're still going to be prone to sickness. It's more than just food, but food is absolutely essential to the process.
For sure. All right. And what is the most exciting thing you see going on that's related to food and health? Oh wait, there was one before that, but I scrolled too far. So hold on to that thought because I want to end on a positive. So, what do you see as the biggest issue facing our society as it relates to food and health? So first biggest issue, and then the most exciting thing.
So the biggest issue for me is the inequality in the food system and the lack of access in so many areas, and the fact that there are people who still don't realize that it's the leaders in the communities that are going to make the difference. It's not going to be somebody on the outside coming in and telling people what to do. So as these food businesses become more successful and I see these underserved communities not getting the same success and the same attention, for me personally, I'm getting more and more pissed off. So I think it's the growing disparity between economics and neighborhoods is the biggest problem. The most exciting thing is related to that are the people that I've gotten to know who are getting a fire under their butt and are really motivated to make sure that their community gets access and gets what they rightfully should be getting. I mean, people say I'm idealistic, and I really don't care. I do believe everyone on the planet has the right to healthy, safe, delicious food. So I think food should be like water and air. I don't think that somebody should be able to charge or deny. I should say this. I don't believe anyone should be denied healthy food, and it's a sin that there are people that go hungry, especially in this country. It's inexcusable. So the exciting part is that there are a lot of people who are realizing that we need like food pantries as a stopgap, but that's not the solution, and that all of us are interconnected. And that's going to be my most exciting thing, is that people are really starting to understand that the 21st century is about collaboration, that we are all interconnected, and as long as someone is going hungry, we're all going hungry.
All right. So, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they reach out to you?
If they want to email, changefood@changefood.org. How would people? Twitter is @Diane Hatz. Yeah, you're going no. Snapchat is too much for me.
Okay, don't worry. I'm not even on Snapchat.
The website's changefood.org. The best thing, the easiest thing is go to changefood.org. If somebody wants to volunteer, there's a section on there. You can fill out an application. We're always looking for people to help with blogging and social media and research. You can also contact us directly through the website.
Okay, perfect. And is there anything else you'd like to add? Any final thoughts?
Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's people like you that are going to finish this process. So thank you. And thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I'm glad to have you on. It's definitely a great conversation, and I think it will help a lot of people, maybe help inspire them to get involved or at least maybe make some simple changes in their own lifestyles. So, yeah, I'm happy to have you on and talk about these things. So, yeah,
Thanks, Caylena.
definitely. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again to today's guest for joining me on the podcast. I hope you'll get a lot from hearing this interview and you're able to find some tangible information and inspiration to work towards creating a healthier lifestyle, getting started in the food movement or industry, starting your business, publishing your book, or going after your creative dream, whatever it may be. And finally, thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in once again to this episode of the Put a Fork in It podcast, the podcast that offers fresh perspectives at the intersection of food, health, business, and creativity. I look forward to sharing future episodes with you and interviewing even more interesting people. If you have any feedback or suggestions on what you'd like to hear on this show, or you'd be interested in becoming a sponsor, email me at Caylena@putaforkinitpodcast.com. Don't forget to check out the episode notes and links and leave comments over at putaforkinitpodcast.com. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and over on YouTube. If you love this show, you can leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes, and don't forget to share it with your friends. If you love this podcast and want to support it, please share it with a friend or donate on patreon.com/putaforkinit. And of course, make it a delicious day.